Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're in the middle of chapter 133, page 258. So it's the story of now, we're talking about the story of the Ovis, the patriarchs, and the work that they did prior to Sinai, prior to Matan Torah. And it's captured in the words in the Pasha Ve'era el Avram Yitzchak V'Yankiv, Avram el Yitzchak V'Yakov B'Keil Shaddai V'Shmi Havaya Lo Nadaiti Lahem. So this pasuk tells us that there was a revelation they had of Keil Shaddai, but not Shmi Havaya, not Havaya. Keil Shaddai is from the word Dai, so it refers to the Chayes Aliki, the divine life force, the divine energy that is what we're calling Eir Hagvul, Eir Pnimi, that is defined, confined in the structure of existence. And their role was to reveal that. That too was concealed. So he elaborated how that is expressed in the expression which says, Avram Hischil Lahoyer. Avram began to radiate light, began to illuminate. What did illuminate? Light, Eir. Which Eir? The Eir of Keil Shaddai, which is primarily the Eir of Eir Hagvul, which is revealing to the people in the world, as the Friedrich Rebbe writes, he was able to create Kalim. He explained in simple terms to everybody that they should be able to be containers to receive godliness. And he was the first to do this. So he simply went around and spread God, spoke to people on their level, and made containers. Eiris b'Kalim, which of course is the key to the whole thing, because if you don't have that, nothing else can be built upon that. That was what he did. I just want to see, there's a very beautiful expression Friedrich Rebbe uses in this. He says, because we hear he only used the word Hascholas Akelim Akudim. Remember he said that Akeda, that Avram is the level of Akudim. So here he says, V'zel Madregas Avram, the Avram Osa Kelim Le'era Leki. Avram made containers for the divine energy. Shabir Hizbir Bir v'Hizbir. He explained and explained and clarified in Yoni Elokus, godly ideas. Hasogas Elokim be'emes l'mayla meklei kibul to Seichel Anushi, because divine comprehension is in truth initially higher than the container of a regular human intelligence. But since Avram is the level of container, that's why he found the words. He found the words to be able to explain and clarify a divine intelligence even to very simple people. This is an addition that the Friedrich Rebbe adds to explain this. So it really adds a dimension of basically of what Avram and the others did, the containers, creating containers. And he elaborated what those containers mean in Ruchnis. What's containers? So we talk about the containers of Atzilus, of course. Pnimis HaKelim, he was speaking about the Pnimis HaKelim, and that's where the Nitzutz Beira, the spark of the divine, of the creator, become part of the spark of the Nivra, of the creation. And that becomes the beginning of all the levels of the soul. That was Pnimis HaKelim. This was back in what chapter was that? Yeah. And then here, chapter 130. So the words there he said, so the kelim are the tachtain of the Beira. This is where it was all inside their containers. And then he explained this in the same idea with Er Zarua. So we just discussed that at length in the previous chapters. Er Zarua is what? Is the implanted energy. Implanted in what? Implanted in Atzilus, that originates like the apple, like the fruit that grows out of the earth, that is brings to fruition and brings to reality, the concrete way, that which was an energy that was completely ethereal and beyond us. And he also explained that it's also the containers. That the containers are like the spark. Like the seed. The seed begins with the containers of Akudim, and then becomes the container. It starts with the containers of Akudim. Even higher than that is the Rishima, the impression, which is the root of the containers, and all the way to the containers of Atzilus. So you see, it's all about Eris and Kalim. Additional point that he made was that the containers themselves emerge from the energy, because it's the impression that's left over once the energy recedes, is the impression that left over that creates the container. So now in this chapter,
what did Avram actually accomplish in the people's heads? You jumped right away to Kalim of Atzilus.
They were. I just said Kalim. I didn't say Kalim of Atzilus. That's the root. It's Kalim of Atzilus. In the physical world, he took people who were pagans, who were unaware of God, and made God aware. Very simple. When you speak to somebody who's selfish and busy with their own lives, and you tell them about God, like the Rabbi says in Basel Gani, Tafshin Aleph, he says, he went around and simply told people there's a God in this world, and he taught people about godliness in ways that they can relate to. That's what Kalim is, by the way. It's not, you don't have to jump to Atzilus or to Lifnei Tzimtzum. Kalim means that you speak to Kalim. But why did Avram have the power? Because he himself was a Keli to Elikus, to Chesed of Atzilus.
On a higher level.
What does that mean? Yeah, whatever. But the bottom line is he's a Keli to Elikus, so he can make others Kalim. Yeah.
What's the similarity between the Rishima and the Rishim? Rishima was mamish just gili of osis that were there before, and the Rishim is that there was a Hamshach or and then the Azoros. So it's not really.
He doesn't distinguish. He just says that this is that one is the root of the root. He doesn't explain the distinction. It's just two different levels. And whenever an energy recedes, there's an impression that's left. The main one was by the Tzimtzum Rishim, the main Rishima. We say the main impression. But there's another one in Akudim that actually turns into a container.
See, the Rishim, was just a gili, what was there before, and the Rishim by Akudim was the Hamshach and the Chazaros. It was actually made something new.
Okay, fine. You can make that distinction. It's fine.
It's similarity is what I'm asking.
I'm sorry? That it's both an impression of something.
It's not like it's Telshul, it's A from B.
You have to say it's probably the similar thing. Why not? Where the containers didn't just emerge out of nowhere. They're rooted in the Rishima of the Tzimtzum. But the energy, you always need energy for there to be, to bring anything into being. The Rishima doesn't have any power of its own. All it is it's like a very vague impression. So both of them are that way. Without air, they don't come to life.
It's not called Gavul Mamish, is it too?
What's a Koyach HaGvul? Koyach HaGvul, all it is a power. It doesn't mean anything. It's an example. An example of letters without any energy in them. They're meaningless. They can't use them. So you could say that basically the energy of the Akudim, when it receded, what it left over was the power of the containers that came from the first Rishima. That's how I would understand it. It didn't come from nowhere. Air doesn't have a power to create containers on its own. It has to have, just like ideas don't create letters. Letters have their own root. But ideas bring letters to life, and they let them emerge. So when you start thinking of an idea, there are two things happening. There's the energy of the idea, and there's the words they're choosing to be expressed. First to yourself and then to others. But if you really dissect it, the letters are there before you started thinking of the idea. Except the letters are dormant. They're there's no use of them. It's like it says, they're rooted in the soul. So there's the the power of letters that God envisioned when the 10 hidden spheres the Esrei Segnus have kalim, not real kalim, but the letters that God envisioned. I want you hear you hear rakia. But it's all in God's mind. To make it come alive, you need the kav, you need the air, but the air first recedes, that's a Tzimtzum Rishim, where all you left is letters. But you can't see these letters, it's an impression, it's only a Rishima, they're not visible. There's no gili involved. Like I said, letters before you start an idea, all you can talk about is in very potential state. There's nothing there in any tangible way. It's just the concept of letters is there, the concept of existence is there. Then comes the kav, emerges and the kav works with it, travels to the reshima, and suddenly it's like the projector now going through a film. If someone saw it, you had on the floor here, or you had in your suit, or you had in your basement, you had a what do we call like cutout letters? What do we call it? A film, not a film, like a screen with letters on it. It's useless. You can't do anything with it. It's like someone giving you a film, negatives. Without light, the negatives are essentially dark and black. So the tzimtzum is, remember that, never forget that tzimtzum concealed all light. Everything. There's not a speck of light. So it's like in a dark room with letters in it. So fine, there are letters there. And they will, but you need a catalyst to get them alive. So comes the kav and starts shining a projector. Now, if it was only the kav without the letters, you wouldn't have structure. So the letters are really the structure of existence, or the way they're envisioned. The energies also has a ethereal structure, as we spoke, chesed and so on. Now they work together, and you begin. Now you don't have kelim yet, but now you're beginning the kav with the reshima. Now you have the chemical mix has happened. Light and root of container has mixed. It'll go through ak, then it'll get to akudim, and the energy will flow into akudim. As the energy recedes, the letters that it carried from the kav earlier emerge. So on kudim is the first place you actually get a distinct container, one container. Then it will continue flowing further. The energy will be more diminished. The container will begin to grow. You'll have nukudim, 10 energies in 10 containers, but they're not balanced. There's no harmony. It's tayu, the kudim. And then will come a final step where the energy will be more tamed, the container is more mature, and they join, and then you have a structure. That's Atzilus. That's where the Avis work, and that's a healthy human being, essentially. A kudim is a seed. It's a seed in the ground. But it's a seed. Where did the seed come from? The seed comes from the first Rishima, which comes from God's envisioning the Kayach HaGvul that He wants a seed. You follow? Mm-hmm. But it's the Kayach HaTzameach, which is the power in earth that brings the seed alive. Or else, as a seed, as I said, a seed sitting on a table. It's like a letter without a light, without a catalyst, without a spark. That's the key here. So that's how I would picture it. And all this is the ovis. All these levels of the ovis is they bring it into containers. So now he explains. So what you have really is that containers. Two things cause a container to emerge. Like I said, the seed is not created by the earth. Earth doesn't create seeds. Even though we did learn that God, the first time when he said Tacha Aretz, so there is an element of without planting seeds, without us planting seeds were placed into the earth by God. Fine. But a seed essentially is not creation of the earth. The seed is planted in the earth, and the earth's divine power brings it to life. So same thing here is with the kelim. The kelim are merged through the air, but they're not created by the air. But he's focusing also that air is what gives it substance, what gives it life, and what makes it really come alive. Or else it would be a seed would be meaningless without the air. Basically, it would be like a woman's egg unfertilized. It gets expelled. It doesn't come to fruition. It will not bear fruit. So the same as the idea is here. So going back to the idea, I know there it's not really the example because that's the egg, there's the seed, but the same idea, you get the idea. So it's the same thing. The man's seed that does not implant itself does not go anywhere. So it doesn't create anything.
So how would you, in this frame of reference, make the three partners of creation?
I said the woman of the womb, the woman's womb is definitely the earth. It's like the earth, for sure. And also her egg, I would have to say that's also part of that, because that's the seed is like the keli, the male seed is the man, right?
The keli, it's the or, no?
No, it's not the or. The or is the neshama. It's the seed in the earth. Like you said here, the seed, like the keli inside of the earth, and the divine force that's inside the earth is the neshama. That's how I would say it.
But the mazel doesn't enter into...
Yeah, the mazel, I forgot about the mazel. The mazel is the He said the mazel is like the kav. The mazel is like the Esses. The mazel, it's It's really four elements here. Then you're talking about the earth.
And the power.
You have things.
And the power.
No, but it's not. No. The power in the earth creates yesh ma'ayin. That there's a yesh. The mazel gives it shape and form. I wouldn't mix the two. It just gets confusing. You could. I mean, it's really four elements. There's four elements. There's earth. There's seed. There's the power of the divine, and there's the mazel. So, I mean, it really comes down to three things, because the earth and the power of the divine is the same thing. Yeah.
But I thought that maybe the mazel.
But you see, but the shape of the child, the person, but the personality of the child, I'll tell you why, because you're confusing it for one reason. Mazel creates the sweetness and the color and the shape. That both mother and father do. A child, his personality is both from mother and father. The Gemara puts it this way, that the father creates the bones and the atzomis and the calcium and so on. The mother is the blood and the flesh. But that's not relevant here, because that's just that's how the partner. And God provides the soul. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say there's three partners, but I would not articulate it in terms of Gemara. He's not using that, because the personality of the child, like the mazel, that goes through both parents. I would base there's a divine power, and there's the seed, and there's the earth. That's how I would focus. The mazel in a child, see also, mazel you use on grass and on vegetation. You don't speak about mazel in the birth of a child.
No?
No, it doesn't say that. It says there's no blade of grass that doesn't have a mazel. Obviously, we all have a mazel in the sense there's a mazel of the neshama. But I don't know, but he doesn't use it here. I don't want to force something that's not necessary. And you don't have to always, everything doesn't have to be one. The idea is clear. The idea is quite clear. But I wanted to emphasize this point because it does appear sometimes that the Kalim have their own root, and sometimes that the Eir is creating the Kali. And here in chapter Kuf Lamed Gimel, I stopped there yesterday because that's what struck me, because he said, like in the beginning of chapter Kuf Lamed Gimel, which we'll read on. So he says, now let me continue summing up 133. He says, according to this, we'll understand what it means that Avram called B'Shem Havaya Keil Elam. Not Keil Ha'elam, not God of the world, but God the world. Which means that the world is godliness. And it's interesting, the parenthesis says, before he didn't say Muhus, before he said it's only a reflection of the power, the generative power in the earth. But here it says maybe it's the actual because he said before that Kalim is Muhus l'Muhus. So it is in a way also Muhus, so both. It's a Ha'ara, whether it's the Eir would be the reflection of, you follow? So the Pri itself, the energy within the Peri is only a reflection of the Mazel. The sweetness, the spiritual sweetness became physical sweetness, tangible sweetness, and the physicality of the Peri came from the seed, so it's actually Muhus of Kayach Etzemeach. So Kayach Etzemeach has like two elements that it becomes it's a catalyst for turning the seed into a fruit. It's also a catalyst for bringing the personality from the mazel into the fruit. Yeah, that's what he said before. That's also very nice, right?
Okay, so
in other words, the seed, once it begins, what do we call it? The growing process begins. The growth process in the earth begins. Two things are happening. You're going to end up getting a fleshy apple, fruit, which has yeshus in it, tangibly, and you're also going to get one that has personality in it. It's sweet, it's red, it's this shape, and so on and so forth. Just a second. Here he says, the Friedrich Rebbe adds not just that there's taste, but there's also yeshus gufei, which is the actual body of the fruit. Taimer, its taste. Reiche, its smell. Umareyu, and its look.
it's all done by the mazel.
Yeah, well, yeah.
The mazel, even the goof itself.
What?
The body itself.
The body comes not from the mazel. The body comes from the Kayach Etzemeach, from the divine power, to make a body. So the chaymer, the raw matter comes from a power of creation.
The shape is.
But whether it will be an apple, whether it will be sweet, whether it will be this color, this smell, that comes from a mazel. That's the 10 hidden spheres. And I said this yesterday. So the personality of existence, your personality, my personality, can be traced all the way to the energies of the 10 hidden spheres. So if you're a Baal Chesed, when you're Chesed, you're actually actualizing the Chesed of the 10 hidden spheres. But the actualization of it in a tangible way, that you can do it physically, that how can the Air cannot create Yesh. Air is opposite of Yesh. So you need a Koyach and Semeach, a Koyach, that's what he says in the Geras HaKedesh, Koyach HaAtzmus. Only mi she'en le'ila v'sibach she'kademes leis. Only something that has no ila v'sibach that can create a Yesh, a physical Yesh. Air can only create other air. It can be diminished energy. Chesed can be a diminished form of Chesed, but it can't suddenly get a body. Where does it get a body from? As I told you, a soul does not create the body. It shapes the body. But the body has to come from other material. Because air doesn't have the ingredients that create bodies. Simple as that. So it's all an interaction. But the symbiosis is so deep that even the container itself is emerging due to the impression of the energy that leaves it. But it's clearly rooted higher than the energy. You have to say that. Like the Isis. I go back. When you start thinking of an idea, there are two things happening. An energy of that concept is being thought, but you're also now using words. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're using words. Sometimes you actually can think of the words, and when you communicate it to someone else, there's clear words being expressed. But the words are empty shells without the idea. What are words? What are letters? A, B, C, D. They're meaningless. It would be, like I said before, a dark film without a projector. So it's there, conceptually it's there. Every child, every soul, it says, Nefesh Meleya Esis. It says, the soul is filled with letters. But child is born with letters. That's why letters, when you're 2-3 years old and start learning to speak, you're not learning words. Their words are inside the soul. You just don't have the energy yet or the ideas to use the words. So it's like many potentials we have inside of us. A musician, someone who has a talent for music. He doesn't suddenly one day, he's born with it. But the music is dormant in a very latent state inside of him. When he grows older and he's taught to sit down at an instrument or something like that, or a piano or anything like that, suddenly his talent, with the expression of it, all comes out. Think of like this. Think of what would we be like if we didn't have machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, God forbid. You had no ability to think, speak, or act. You'd be a vegetable, God forbid. One would be a vegetable. You'd be a person with 10 faculties. There'd be chachma being a das chesed gvur tefes netzach chayd yisrael malchus, but it would be no way to express it. So it'd be like being locked in a like a soul locked in a sack. It can't express itself. So the levushim don't do anything. But on the other hand, what's the garments? What's machshava dibur ma'aseh without the koiches? It's like garments hanging in your closet. It has no meaning. It's not significant in any way. I'm just another example of this. I use levushim, but the same idea is Esis, Eris, and Kalim, in a way. So now the key thing is that the Kali also, there's an expression we learned earlier, Mesavas ha'er nasa kli. From the thickness of the energy emerges the container. But not that it creates the container. It's the energy. It's like the letters are there before. The thickness of the energy allows it to emerge. He used that expression also before. He says, "Gamzem misavas ha'er." Here.
Does that mean that the or carries?
Misavas ha'kel that couldn't be chnusishmal. Shenas mina er v'hina gamke misavas ha'er. Yeah, it means the or carries and reveals. This is a very, very important point. It carries and reveals. Air carries and reveals the power to create a yesh. But it's not originated in air. It's like exactly, I'm telling you, the best example is soul and body. When a seed is fertilized and the conception happens, the conceiving of a child, the body did not come from the soul. But without the soul, the body will cease to grow and stop being. And the best proof is at the end of life, that when the soul departs, the body remains intact. But it does decompose. Why? Because as much as intact, it ultimately, its life force, to make it be vitality and viable, requires even the physical body. But the physicality of it, like he says in the Pasuk Chaliyo, when the energies leave the containers, it's like a gufi yishtar b'loi neshmasa. It's like a body without a soul. But you can't say the soul creates the body. You could say the soul carries the energy of the body. It carries life into the body. Because think of again, a seed, the earth does not create the seed. But take away the earth, the seed will rot and just wither. Water does not do it either. It's a matter of understanding what the ingredients are and then how they work together.
So the koyach hatzmeach with the body.
The example Chassidus brings for this is a Torah mitzvahs, for example. Torah is Torah er, mitzvahs are kelim. Ner mitzvah v'Torah er. So Torah is like er, and mitzvahs are kelim. Mitzvahs are things you do. Okay, some mitzvahs are b'machshava, but mitzvahs are tangible Ukraine containers. Torah is er, it's knowledge. You have to know what to do. So the interesting thing is, Torah tells you about mitzvahs. Torah even tells you the power that mitzvahs in some way are higher than Torah. Even Torah reveals that. So Torah carries and reveals the power of containers, of mitzvahs. Like it also says about tshuva. Tshuva is higher than Torah, but Torah reveals and carries the power of tshuva to us. This is some of the examples used. Like you say, Mordechai and Esther. Everything Esther did, she followed Mordechai's words. Mordechai was Torah. Esther was the implementer. So she followed Mordechai, but without Esther, there's no implementation. Just different examples for the same idea.
Would it be fair to say that the mafli lasses of the Eibishter is the koyach hatzmeach between the soul and the body?
Yeah, you could say that at some point for sure. But mafli lasses you use only when you finished explaining all the things you could explain. Then the last so-called spark of what actually gives it the power to really become Ayin to Yesh. But you see, Ayin to Yesh could have been without a seed. God could say a prayer, and you'll have an apple tree grow out of the earth. It didn't work that way. He says, plant a seed and then say a prayer. So you know that it's God's power, but it's mislapshus through a process that we can identify. As I said yesterday, the more you can identify, the more relationship with God we have, and the more we can retrace the steps and do something about it. Because then it becomes just a miraculous thing. That, okay, someone will say, so how do I bring brachas into this world? You say, pray. No, do something. You have to make a keli. So, at the end of the day, you realize that even the seed, like it says, the Gemara says, it says the pasuk, so it says the 6 different tractates in Gemara, not tractates, 6 Dorim, how do you say Dorim? Tractates, or whatever. Masechta is a tractate, but 6 sections of the Talmud. So one is Amunah, it says Zerayim, Sefer Zerayim. So they ask the question, Amunah, Zerayim is not Amunah? Zerayim is a natural thing, you plant things. Zeriyah. So it says, no, because Hamayim b'cheyalam and v'zereya. You believe in God, and you plant. That's true Amunah. That even though there's a natural explanation for it, you really realize that even behind that is really a divine power, because that just tells you how it happened. It still doesn't tell you how the seed has that power. So like I said yesterday, science begins in understanding what exists, but someone says to you, but how did that seed get the power? There's no explanation for that. That's why it's fine. I mean, just a matter of putting science in context is just realize science begins where the Yesh began. Science can't talk about Ayin. Doesn't have any access to Ayin. It talks, once the Yesh began, we'll tell you how it gets from here to here, and we can replicate it, and look what we develop in technology, massive developments. But it only goes back to the first ball of gas, or to the first seed. How that first seed came, science doesn't have anything to say, and that's fine. The problem is when science says there is nothing before, and the answer to that is, how do you know? Science can't talk about before because it's not scientific. On the other hand, for a Torah person to say, well, I'll tell you your science, it's also not right. The Torah is not here to replace science. Science is a human trying to understand how God put the process into motion. But there is a process. The problem is when there's a confusion of these two. But now going back, so Apizeh Yuvan, so he says, I'm not going to read it again, I'm just summing it up. What means Avram, that he called out Kel Elam. That basically he's saying that the Keli is the Eir. That's what I want to really emphasize here now. Because that point, I think, was lost a bit. That's why it's so important that the Rishim, he says, the spark, the seed is what? The seed is the Kelim of Akudim that came from the Rishima. From the receding energy. So where's the Keli really? The Keli really is, the container is energy. So he says, the personality, the existence of the muhus apri, the actual fruit, in this case the yesh, the elam, is a reflection. It's a reflection from the personality of the sweetness and so on of the fruit, or a muhus, or it's actually an embodiment of the yesh of the keichet sameach rakshabo b'gakshama. K'may ken hakelim hein ha'er shemezanas hakelim shezeh reish manal. I'm just reading it again because I read it, but it was not. I didn't elaborate. Same thing. The containers. So in other words, now he's saying the fruit is like the containers. More namely, the spark, the seed. So he says, and that is rooted. They are the air from which the container emerged. As the energy receded, the container emerged. V'chein b'shashim, and also in the root, hein b'chinas hakelim da'ak. Those letters were there before the tzimtzum. It's conceptual letters, obviously. Nothing changed. Like I said before, a child is born with letters. The words we speak today were not created in 2000 and where are we? 13. Tavshanayin Gimel. Good. Glad somebody's grounded here. They weren't created today. They were there, but they were dormant. So these letters emerged. So they became something of substance. Obviously, their real substance would not emerge until Akudim, where there the energy would recede, and that's where the Keli would emerge. So bottom line is, so what do we have? The Kelim is Elokus. The thing that keeps confusing me, to be honest, is he's saying that the Keli is Eir. If he said the Kelim were Elokus, it wouldn't be such a problem. But he's saying the Kelim is Eir. He's making it clearly that the Keli is the Eir, except in a Megushim Dika way. That's the thing that's throwing me a bit, because it's not always what we say. We usually say the Kelim is Elokus, and the Eir brings out the Elokus of it.
Must be an interface between.
Yeah, no, so he's right. The interface is deeper here, because Nakudim in the Eitz Chaim, it says clearly that the Keli becomes, what do you say, the Lashon there? Okay, it's fine. It's consistent. He's just adding a component. He's basically adding the component. It's like the neshama. It's basically like this. When you see a child come out of a mother's womb upon birth, you can say the child is a product of the soul, even though technically it's not. But it's without the soul's spending 9 months and making it grow, that a child would not have been alive. God forbid. Okay, fine, so be it.
So the Kav actually goes from Ak to Akudim, and that's the process.
Yeah. Akudim is where the first Keli emerges.
Ak to Akudim. Yeah,
Akudim is where the first seed emerges. But he's saying it is definitely that the Keli is air. Good. And there's two areas we're talking about here. This is the Rishima, the root of the Rishima. He's also saying.
Why are you puzzled with the fact that it comes from air?
Because the Rishima usually don't say comes from air. The Rishima comes from Asius.
So you start from the air.
No, but the Asius themselves are not from the air. The Asius are there before the air. The Rishima, the Keicha Gvul of Elokus turns into Asius and turns into Kelim.
Okay, but it's also
Air is a separate track. The air just reveals it and carries it. But to say carries it does not mean that it is it. He's saying the air ba b'akshama. So I'm thinking it can mean two things. It could be the air hagvul is coming back shama, or it's the air in general is coming back shama.
That has everything. Ak has everything. It's Soviv. It has everything in it.
Yeah, but it's not. But there's two tracks. There's Kelim and Air. There's two tracks. In chapter 16, he made it very clear. I have to go back there, but I'm almost sure. Trust me that there's an additional point here. I can tell you that right now. Because you go back to chapter 16, you're going to see clearly, he makes a distinction several times, that the Keich HaGvul and the Eir HaGvul is not the same thing. And one is not rooted in the other. Obviously, when it comes all the way up above, it's all rooted. That's not a problem. I'm not concerned about that. But talking about the lower levels. Let me ask you a question. The Kelim of the Esses Firis Agnuzis are rooted in the Eris of the Esses Firis Agnuzis. You don't say that. You say the Kalim come from a Keich HaGvul, and the Eir also has a Tziyur. They're two different tracks. Just like the Yesh doesn't come from the Eir. The Yesh is carried through the Eir, but the Eir is not the Makar HaYesh. Here he's saying that the Eir is the Makar HaYesh.
So what is the problem?
So you have to say probably he means that because it's carrying it, it's like the source of it. It's fine. It's not an asking a question. It's more of an emphasis different than the emphasis that he's been doing before. The emphasis, when you think about it straight, they work together, and the air carries it for sure and reveals it for sure, but it does not create it.
So what's
very simple? The Tzimtzum, what did the Tzimtzum do? It concealed all the air, and there's letters.
left?
Yeah, there's Shima. Yeah, but you can't see them. There's letters. That's the best proof that the letters don't come from the air. Because if the air disappeared, the letters should disappear. Why are the letters there? How could there be letters there? The answer is because the letters have their own root. And he even went on to say earlier, the letters are not even touched by the tzimtzum. Because the letters have their own so-called root. That's why I'm saying that by saying here that the letters are essentially the ir b'hakshama, that's what's... Now if you could be more precise, maybe he's not saying the letters are the ir, maybe he's saying that the fruit is the ir, the yesh. He says the kalim, but he does say kalim hein ir, shemazen nasa kalim. Okay. So be it. It's not a fundamental question. It's an emphasis that is an additional emphasis that it would seem to me would have qualified a little more. Because based on if you go back, maybe I'm just talking to myself. Maybe it doesn't bother you. Fine with that. That's fine. I'm not trying to cause problems.
But you can't say that the words are above Akshama. That just means what you're saying.
No. He says the kalim hein eris. The language here is too. I want to just see right here. Chapter 11. Oh boy, Mazel. Oh, he says Mazel here too. Hey, let's read something together. Look at page 17. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Since I might as well cause you to agonize a bit as well. Misery loves company. So we should only have such misery, such agonizing. On page 17, there's a parenthesis that begins like 12 lines from the bottom. Maybe 15 lines. You see? So I'm going to read that. V'hinei mamashnis bar liel yuvan, the be'emes in truth yeshus and ma'ala bekelim ma'ala eris. There's an advantage of kelim over it. The sheidish hakelim hem merashim shezeh reishim einsev shalifnei hatzimtzum. The root of the containers is from the reishim, is from the impression of before the reishim einsev shalifnei hatzimtzum. Okay, 1 second. The ha'esis the reishim loy noga b'hem hatzimtzum klal. That the letters of the Rishima were not affected by the Tzimtzum at all. Even though you could say that by hiding the air, that's how they became in existence. Then look at the next page. Go to page Yud Ches. So it says so how do yesh yusu in ma'ila ba'keil megaba eris, line 2. V'chein muvim ma'mosha, but look at now the next line, 4th line. V'zeu hatam masha eris yed masaj ba'keil. This why? Machmas shesherish hakelim l'ma'ila ma'eris. See, the root of the container is higher than the eris. Here he's saying the containers are the eris. That's what's bothering me. I'm not saying it as a question because I don't think it's a question. I think it's more of an emphasis that the kelim do emerge through the air, like we said clearly in Eitz Chaim, that the and also but Eitz Chaim he said clearly the kudim was when the air was nimshach, and then it returned. What was left, there was an impression, and that's the keli. So there's an aspect when the energy is removed, the container emerges, and that in some way dictates that the container is a ultimately really air. It's just a little different than I would understand it. That's all I'm saying. Verstehst du, was ich sage jetzt?
Doesn't the kalim of one level become an aura of a level underneath it, of the aura underneath it?
Doesn't matter, but the kalim still have their own root. So how do you say that the root of the containers is higher than the root of the energies? Because ultimately containers have their own. Okay, it's an additional point that needs more elaboration, but I just wanted to emphasize it. That's all. It's fine. I'm saying it doesn't contradict because it's just saying that there's an element of container that is really just a form of energy manifesting in container form. I still think that there's an element of the container that's not connected, that is not directly connected to the air that's coming from a place higher. That doesn't contradict the fact that it's also the air coming in Bakshama. Like I said, if there's no earth, there's not going to be a fruit, even no matter how many seeds you have.
But it seems from what it said like this, that the Kalim, the Tzimtzum, were also not apparent because of the aura.
Yeah, but appearance doesn't mean anything. Appearance is just revelation. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means they're not a revealed entity. They're,
And therefore, for all intents and purposes, it's the process of the aura that brings them into.
Remember, when you put Ur and Keli side by side, even if a Keli is a Keli for an Ur, Keli fundamentally is a concealer, and Ur is fundamentally a revealer. When God said, "I want a Keli," means I want an identity. When He says, "I want an Ur," I want a revelation. Very, very similar, different expressions. So Keli, by definition, is an identity. As soon as you say identity, you're talking about not reflecting something else, but its own identity. That's why Ur without Keli cannot assume identity, because Ur is a revelation of its source. The source says, "I want it to be an Ur Chesed." Fine, so the Ur Chesed will travel, won't have anywhere to rest, because it can't find an identity that will confine it. Now and what I just said is the essence of Ur and Keli. Their personality, their psychology is different, their whole psyches is different. Yeah, but the Ur and Keli have very different roles. That's what I'm saying to you. So a Keli cannot come from an Ur. It's fundamentally a different. That's why a guf can't come from a neshama. But it doesn't mean that the neshama is not the force that carries the power that the body should emerge. It definitely is. Anyway, and then he continues now with the Sefer Shabbein. Back to that, which he went back before to Shaya Yichud V'Amunah. What did he say there? If you remember, he said Shaddai. The Mitzat Chesed, Gedula, the energy would just flow endlessly. And Dai says stop. So Gevura, you say Gadol v'Gibur. God is great, that's endless flow. Gibur, He's powerful to stop the flow, to say stop, which tells you that really that is the divine energy. They're both divine. Both the flow is divine and telling it to stop is divine. So thus, the energy in existence is simply divine energy.
E equals MC squared.
Existence is simply divine energy that is concealed. And both the energy and the concealment are both divine. That's the beauty of what it says in Shayach V'Emunah. That's unbelievable vart. You could say the energy is, you could say the concealment is just, no, but even the concealment is divine. So there's nothing about existence that's not divine.
Seemingly the concealment is even greater than the...
Yeah, it has more power to stop something, yeah. So he says, so he's bringing the Shaykh Ramunah to prove that existence is all it is air. Okay, you have to say here, he's going deeper and saying we're not talking here about the root of the containers, we're talking about the containers as being divine energy. As a matter of fact, I'm now thinking he doesn't even mean air, hagvul. He means air as an air alaki, maybe. That the kalim are really just divine energy. That's maybe what he's trying to say here. Okay, that's a little mamasha. Ara alaki is babak shama. But naspachin is mitzvah. The ara alaki, the divine reflection, came back shama.
The koyach of the rule is bligvul.
Okay, v'zel kel elam she'elam alakus mamish. I'm just summing up because we learned this. And this is a kel elam, that the world itself is alakus mamish. That the keli is the air. That's what Avram Avinu. And that's why he's a Merkava. A Merkava means a chariot completely aligned with his rider. With the chauffeur? No.
Coach.
The coach.
Right.
Okay, the coach.
I wasn't born in the 17th century.
The wagon is aligned with the coach. The coachman.
Coachman.
Okay. Then he goes on to explain, to contrast this, he goes on to explain about the philosophical distinction of Rama Kol Goyim Hashem, those that say that God is too great to be on earth. The opposite of Kei Le'olam. What's the opposite of Kei Le'olam? That God is too holy. So he explains this is because they see the world as Ilah V'Olol, cause and effect. Cause and effect, he explained, with two examples, Meichen and Midas, and in Meichen itself, a teacher and a student. They're commensurate to each other. So the Midas are not rooted in the Seichel, but the Seichel bring them into being, and the Seichel have to invest in them, and therefore they're affected by them. Same thing with the teacher and the student. The student is not created by the teacher, because if he doesn't have Seichel of his own, he's not going to be a student. But the teacher brings alive his intelligence. That's Ilah V'Olol. And there you could say, okay, they're commensurate to each other. Therefore they affect each other. He says, when it comes to God, you can't say that, because even heaven is equal distance to earth. And everything is just a creation from a reflection. It doesn't have an impact. Like we said with the power of the growth, that it's only a reflection and does not affect the Kayachet Sameach. So the power of the generative power in earth is not like a teacher invested in a student. It's detached, it's beyond it. It just happens to be in earth. He planted it in earth, so he gave her the power. Okay. And this is Rizal Shagil Avram Veidir Be'elam V'Koda El Keil Elam Sha'elam Hu Alakus. Okay, I'll continue reading from the top of page Reish Nechaz, because we began with it here, and I elaborate. So I'll just read it quick. Rizal Sham Razal now starts a new thing. So we established what means Keil Elam. Kelim, that the Kelim, the containers themselves, are divine. Existence is really divine energy. And Avram revealed that. This is also what it says, Amar Azal Til Avram Lo Yahav Zikna. Ad Avram Lo Yahav Zikna. There was no aging, old age. Or Zikna means also, as he's going to say, the revelation of age is through the beard. Zokon. Hadras Ponim Zokon. Now, why is a beard connected to age? First of all, it emerges as we age. You're not born with it. And secondly, there's also the zikna. As a person gets older, the beard gets wider. We have here specimen 1. We all looked like that once.
Specimen 1, specimen 2, specimen 3. Specimen.
The widest one here. Yeah. You saw the pictures they made of the Rebbe every year. The Rebbe from Tafshin Yud. You see. The Rebbe actually became white very late, relatively. In his yeah. In Tafshin Chof, the Rebbe has a little, but Tafshin Chof, and the Rebbe is already almost 60, 58. It's mid-60s, but yeah, 60s. By 70, the Rebbe was completely white. But
before Avram, people didn't even have beards. What do you say?
They used to shave. Avram brought in the concept of beards.
No, I didn't have a beard.
They have a zikna. I don't think is beard. I don't think they could shave. It was not so easy to shave those days. He needed a big effort. I don't know how they would.
Zalman Jaffe wrote in his mind counter with the Rebbe that the Rebbe told him to grow a beard or whatever. So he told the Rebbe once, "I take after my mother."
They have a zikna. Now zikna means age here. Upira sharat.
So many years. I mean, there was such a thing as aging was such a slow process.
The Maimar Chazal, I think, is talking about that people just died. There was no such thing as aging and dying. It was like that type of thing. Because I think it also talks about not having illnesses. Right after that, I think that's the literal.
Started it.
I have to look it up. But anyway, here he's definitely interpreting it on a. He's interpreting this on a pneumistic level. Pirush Arava Magid Zal. Takavon Shloiha is Gal is B'chinas Dikna. Zikna was a high level of divine energy. It's called the Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna. Yud Gimel Tikkun means the 13 strands. Or Tikkunim is actually Tikkun is like a ornaments actually. Tikkunei Dikna of the beard. The 13 Tikkunim. The 13 sometimes Tikkun is like Levushim. It's going to say the 13 channels of the beard. Okay? Sometimes tikkun spheres are called tikkunim. And that corresponds to the 13 attributes of compassion. Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim that we say in El Yom Kippur. Hashem, Kel Racham V'chan, and so on. Different ways how those 13 are counted. So he says that means until Avram you didn't have this revelation. He revealed God in the world. So there was no revelation like that. So he explains why. What does Sidus, what does the beard have to do with all this? So the explanation is that Sidus are the mostly sometimes like residue, but mostly is like the excess of the mind. I mean, it's an expression from Zohar and other places, but think of it like this. Think of a saturated container. Right, it's saturated, and drops start spilling out from edges, like a barrel that's so packed that it starts. What's the word for it? It bursts outward. So moishes are things that, like, generally speaking, moishes. That's what moishes means. That when something is full and you have something that drops out, like noiser, the leftover, the overflow, the leftover, the exactly. So moishes mechin. So the example Kabbalah uses is the mechin in the mind. No, it's a beautiful poetic example. I didn't elaborate, but let me elaborate now. Think of it like, the brain has a mind in it, and the mind is so overpacked. The here is like a break. It's like something bursts out from the in every crevice, every little thing.
There's no more room in it as you get older. You can't.
Anyway, this is how Kabbalah explains what the Sidus are. Now you have to remember, when you explain this, you always have to qualify, because we look at everything from the outside in. You look at a human being, and someone says, "Here is the outburst is the overflow of the brain." It's ridiculous. But you can't think like that. You have to think how it's in Ruchnis. It starts not down here. The concept of how we're created here, and the brain and the skull and the mind, is only really symbols of Etzelem Elikim. So what is it? That's why I have to speak about it conceptually. Conceptually is that Meichin is a very powerful energy. It's inside of the container called the skull, the brain, and when it spills out, when it bursts out, the here is like little outbursts of Meichin. Now, obviously, they don't have intellect in them, but they have energy in them. That's for sure. So the Gashmis of here reflects this Ruchnis of here. What's the Gashmis? That the hair follicle is connected to the skull. When you cut it, it doesn't have any pain because it's minimal. When you pull it, you feel something. That means it has some nerve endings, which tells you that a Ruchnis here is coming from a very high level, but it's in a very diminished flow. So Cyrus will always be an example in Chassidus for a very, very narrow, diminished flow, but from a very high level of energy. That's why here, beard has such significance, and here is so critical. That's why beard is a holy thing. Why is a beard a whole thing? Who cares? Cut a beard, not cut a beard. It's just a hair on the body. We don't have a problem cutting our hair, cutting your hand hair. Why does this have holiness in it? So you could just say it's Exeris HaKosov, fine. But it's not just that God decreed it. There's a reasoning for it, because it's symbolic of the energy that flows from a very high level, and that's why a beard is a symbol of Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. There was a couple by the Rebbe who didn't have children for many years, and the Rebbe, he was clean shaven, and the Rebbe said to him that children chappen zechan af habared. Right? Children, when you hold them, they're always, your beard is in jeopardy. Let's put it this way. That's what the Rebbe said. So they understood the message, and they did what they did, and they had children.
It's in the Maimer of Luchadodi. There's a Maimer Zalek.
Yeah, of course. And then there's another thing what I want to say about a beard is that the Rebbe Rasha, I heard this from Mendel Marozo. We were visiting, the Bod L'chaim and Beryl Weiss in the hospital. He was not well, from California. So she told him a story that in Lubavitch there was a guy called Avram the Felsher. There was a thing called a Felsher. A Felsher was like a paramedic. like a half doctor or something, So in Lubavitch there was no doctors, there was felsher.
Physician's assistant.
Yeah, like something like that, right? So he was called Avram the Felsher. He had a long beard. Felsher.
Probably it's a German word.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean falsher. It does not false.
It's a Russian word.
It's a Yiddish word, I think. Felsher. Yeah.
No, Russian. It's
The barber,
Yeah.
The barber used to bleed
But I think
people.
it's a German.
Anyway, the Rebbe Rashab called him over.
Bonkers guy.
So the Rebbe Rashab called over Rabbi Avram and said to him, I don't like doctors. That's what he said. Why? Because doctors tapping avant. A doctor is like he's tapping a wall. A seeing eye doctor taps like a seeing eye, and a bad doctor taps like a blind doctor, but they're both tapping a wall, meaning they don't see what's going on. They're tapping a wall and trying to figure it out. He says, but you I like. That's what the Rebbe Rashab said. Why? Because when a Jew comes to you with a problem, the first thing you do is grab your beard. You start doing, yeah. So right away there's a head start. Because you have Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikna, and the right side is Atik Yemin, and the left side is Arich Hampen. That's what the Rebbe Rashab said. Right, so you already have, you're already dealing with the... So the next time someone says, let me think this through, don't think it's meaningless.
This question might be, you would have thought that the beard would continue to grow all the time,
I said yesterday that God created a few perfect heads, and the rest He covered with hair. So, tell that bald is beautiful. You can join American League of Bald Americans. What is it? Something like that. Yeah, it's fine. That's a good, interesting question. No one ever grows really bald down here, but you don't want to grow bald down there. It's not usually a good sign. It's usually a sign of health problems. Anyway, so the point I want to make is that without this introduction, it could become a little like weird. What's this here? This, but you have to remember, it all starts in Ruchnis, and the Adam Lamata is a symbol is a dugma tzelem, the image of the Adam Lamaila, of the human being. So here is essentially used in Chassidus and Kabbalah. It's a very big topic here, that when you need a flow to go from a very high level to another level, but you want the high level energy, but you can't bring it down. So Cyrus are symbolic of a very deep tzimtzum. So the flow is there, but it's very, very narrow, exactly like hair strands. I should say one more final Jewish relativity joke. The one where 3 hairs on your head is not much, but 3 hairs in the soup. So count your hairs. I know it doesn't really help Shat and Ayin Beis, but listen, I'm doing all my hairy jokes. Talking about here, I finally found a place I could bring some hairy jokes in. Every section, we got to lighten it up. So when you cut the hair, you don't feel pain. Nevertheless, they still have some diminished energy, life from the meichin. Because the cyrus, if you put them under a microscope, you'll see they're hollow. Actually, definitely the follicle. You ever see the follicle? What's it called? Magnified? It's very interesting, actually. Here is like a strand, but the edge actually has a hollow where it enters the skull. Yeah. Here is very fascinating, by the way. If you ever study, I did a lot of studying of it.
Well, what's significant about?
Because it seems so meaningless, but it's not. Here is a very, very interesting creation here. It's so tiny you don't really see it, but you put it under a microscope, you'll see unbelievable things in here.
What's the significance that they're hollow?
No, the hollow is just, he wants to say that there's some k'tzas meichin, something's flowing in there. It's not.
They have sap, like a tree.
It's not just a rug you put on your body. So I said him klum shebehem mislabish achayis. Through them is in scientific language would be the nerves. The nerve endings are there. There's nerve endings. That's why you pull it, you feel it. It's not just. Look, there's a lot. V'hine muhus asayri gufa machayis shebemeach. And here again, he's saying the same thing. The same idea that the thing itself comes from the chayis. The muhusa sayre, like the muhusa pri of the fruit. He's saying keil elam. He wants to say how Avram brings keil elam. So till Avram, you didn't have the gili of tikkun dikna, because the sayre could conceal Remember, when someone looks at the hair, if you think of our universe as a bunch of a hairy universe, essentially, all you see is hair, you could say there's no energy. But there is, it's concealed. So he's saying the Muhus HaSayra Hu Gufu here Merachayis Shebemeich Shemesave Umizgasha V'Nasa Sayra. So again, he does not talking physical, because the physical it's not the case. Well, I'm saying maybe it is the case. Now, children are born with hair.
Some are.
But no, it could be the case, because why is a beard a sign of wisdom? And we find the story with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we say by the Haggadah Pesach, that he became, like the simple question. So, what is this, a trick? You just make his beard white and that's it, everybody suddenly says he has wisdom? Because no, what God did was he showed his beard was a reflection of the truth, that he did have this wisdom. So why is hair a reflection of wisdom? Well, it's also sightus when you bring Beis sightus. One of the proofs of maturity is when you bring two hairs. Why is hair? Because hair is a expression of a mature process. It's not just an incidental thing. So Musa said, "Who gufu mechai shemeich shemesave that became thickened, the mizgashim and materialized with nasa saida, it became a hair strand. V'savusa ba'efen kazeh nasa kamei dover nivdal legamri min haguf." But the way it's created is as if it's completely separate from the body. You wouldn't think, the best proof is you can cut it off and you won't know. So it's like almost separate from the body, to the point you don't feel any pain. In other words, he's showing here how concealed the energy within it is. And in truth, it's really from the chayes that just became here. And the same thing is the creation of the creature. Like we said before, all they are is energy and reflection that extends from the keich shefeya, was the power of the flow. It's divine energy that became a creature. And this is what Avram Avinu revealed and notified and declared and informed the world. And through this, he brought down the revelation of the 13 strands, the 13 channels of the beard, of hair, the Shem Kale. Kale is the first one of the 13. Shem Hashem Kale. So in this count, sometimes we don't count Hashem to the 13. You start from Kale. Sometimes you do start. The Rebbe has the different opinions in the Kutz Sichos. So what do we have here? So that's what it means. That till Avram, you didn't have this revelation. Here, the world could have been perceived as being an external force that you didn't recognize that it's really good, divine. And Avram, Mamshech Zikna, he was Mamshech Disud Kimel Dikuna Dikna. And the first one, Kale. That means Kale Elam. Kale. This also explains Kale Elam.
He was Mamshech that.
Right, so what's wrong with that?
It existed before he came.
Of course it existed, but it's hidden.
This is before this Hamshachah was made.
Yeah, fine. He's saying that's what Avram came. It says, Ad Avram lo yihav zikna. Till Avram was not this gilui of Kale Elam, of Kale, Yud Gimel Tikun Dikna. That's what. Well, be'emes, okay.
It showed that Cyrus are alive.
Right.
He brought the oil into Hakshama. Is that the same thing?
No, he revealed that the air that's in Makshama is really air.
It's all this here, the ganze Welt, is lebendig, it's leb.
Right. It's like air zerua. You see here, we see a world that is full of plants. The apple is just an analogy. You see things, you see minerals, plants, animals, human beings. You see a sun and a moon. So you could argue, okay, they're here again. Avram came and revealed these are fruits of something that was planted here, that was initially concealed, but it's really Bakshame. It is the material shell that is really divine energy that's giving it for life. That's essential. I mean, it's not. We've learned this. The idea has been taught. He's just explaining it in context of Eris and Kalim. In truth, Biyah, the creation of Biyah, is the first tikkun, the first channel of the 13 channels of the beard. Like it says in Idra Rabbah. That's Zohar Parsha Nosei. Page 132a, the Tlas al Menafkin Mitikuna Kadmo. that three worlds emerge from the first tikkun. Three worlds. Which are the three worlds? Biyah. So in other words, not Kale. So he's saying Be'emes is how it's Biyah. So Biyah comes from the first tikkun. We'll see where he's going with this. Like he says in Teireh Alter Rebbe. In the explanation, Moshe Daber, yeah. He's basically saying here, in other words, that Kel Elam, that's how it stems. Kel Elam. Kel is the first of the Gimel Tikkun Dikna, and so is Biyah. So in Biyah, he's revealing Atzilus, essentially. In Biyah, he's revealing the air of Atzilus.
Kale is from Erkanpi. Kale is from Erkanpi.
It doesn't say that here.
But usually Tikkun Dikna is a Mishapa from Erkanpi into Atzilus.
There's no usually when we're learning Ayin Beis. Whatever he says, he says. Whatever he doesn't say, he doesn't say. I don't know.
But he didn't say here some Mishapa. He didn't say it was some Mishapa Atzilus. He says it's just Mamsheh.
But he said it a few pages before. I'm just wondering why he added Savas Biyah here. That's the question. But Emes is Savas Biyah, Metikun addition. Okay, fine, it's all right. We have to look in Teireh maybe. And this is the meaning that Avram began to radiate, illuminate. He drew down the energy and the revelation. That's the level of Er Zarua, the implanted energy, light. Behind Elias Slapshus Eres Bekalim, that means there should be Slapshus Eres Bekalim. Like I said, Eres in Kalim, that's the key. So there should be a Mitzias Er, like we said before. It's a Mitzias Zarua, it's a Mitzias Er. And there should be a revelation of it. Like we learned before, chapter 130, and then that he says to the world, means he says to the energy, divine energy, stop. Okay, Metzias Er and Gilead. Let me just see something. Because Metzias Er and Gilead. Yeah, okay, good. Metzias Er and Gilead, good. Kalim. And also in general, in other words, not just the Eris and Mekalim, but also in general, there should be a transmission of energy from its root and its source, that it should become a Metzias Er. So, more specifically, that's Eris and Kalim. Like he said, he spoke two things. In Elam Edai, he said Shaddai, and its Sheresh Rishon is Tzimtzum. In Atzilus, it's Kalim. He said those words. So in Atzilus, it creates Kalim, create a Metzias Er and a Gilead Er, that they manifest and they are revealed. And higher than that in general is that it should be a general revelation of Gilead Eliki. Which means that there should be transmission of Eretz, you see Esesfir is Atzilus. That's what he says. And through that should also be a revelation, Lamata, also below, should be a revelation of the divine light. Also in Biyah. Also down here.
But what's Nimshach?
I'm not sure what you're asking me. Everything is Nimshach. Light and energy is Nimshach.
That's not the Esesfir of Atzilus.
What's not? It just said it is the Esesfir of Atzilus. Behind the Kolos Hamshachos Ishtalshus, why they are others. So he's summing up now the whole thing. So Kolos Hamshachos Ishtalshus, the general cosmic order, which is the structure of existence and its divine flow into the structure, is through the Avos. This is a very critical line. So you see, the Avos is basically filling up the world, saturating it with a divine energy that is within existence, which, as we said, is a great high level, but it's not Matan Torah yet. Because until the Ovis, it wasn't yet appropriate. It wasn't yet Kitikune means fitting. Kitikune, like the way it should have been. It wasn't right. Things weren't right. Commission is Baral Le'el Sham, meaning Perikuf Lamed. The Ad Ovis B'chinas Tayu. Hatayu. Till the Ovis there was no Tikkun. So Tikkun means also appropriate, also Tikkun. He said before, remember, the first 2,000 years of the world is Tayu. Second 2,000 is Tikkun, is Torah. The third 2,000 is Mashiach. So the Ovis began the second 2,000, and that's Tikkun. Before that was Tayu, meaning chaotic. And as the Ovis, the patriarchs that began to realign the universe, after all the distortions and the chaos of the Mabul, like it says, 10 generations from Adam till Noach, they destroyed the world. And then came 10 generations from Noach to Avram, that he repaired the world. And Avram was the main force. We learn in Bashal Gani too, he began to draw down godliness. Till then it was just becoming more and more distant and removed. So they began the process, their work was to realign the universe to the way it's supposed to be. Sometimes an example for this is that when you think of history, think of it in terms of like a child's development. The birth of a child is the beginning of creation. So at that point, the parents take care of the child, and everything is given to the child. That's what it says. The first 26 generations until Matan Torah, Nezunim b'chazeh shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They received everything from above. That's why they lived long in the first years. But what a child doesn't have is that he gets spoiled. The child has not earned his way. So the Mabul destroyed. There's like the first so-called destruction as a result of a spoiled child. Then came starting the fixing, and Avram begins so-called like the beginning of education of the child, and aligning the child the way he's supposed to be. And Matan Torah is like the bar mitzvah. That's like an example. Mashiach is the final marriage. But it's all a process of development of maturity and immaturity. So you have on one hand great gifts that the people had in the beginning, but also the great abuse of those gifts.
Were like when the kid went to college.
That there should be a revelation in the world, and there should be a manifestation of Eris and Kalim. Remember, when we say Eris and Kalim and Atzilus, don't get intimidated by it. It simply means aligning existence. And also that Bisavas HaKelim, they also reveal that the creation of the containers. Now he's spelling that part out also. That the creation of the containers are also divine. And they drew down this revelation below that Kel Elam, that the world is godliness. So we have everything here. We have the drawing down the energy, we have drawing down into the containers, and also the containers themselves are also. So in other words, when you see in the apple the sweetness and you align it to the sweetness and spiritual sweetness, that's like aligning the earth. When you see that the physical apple comes from the seed, which comes from the power of also of the earth, that also reveals godliness in a different way. So both the yeshus of the world, the physical, tangible entity, and its personality are all essentially divine. The close this general transmission is the level of Kel Shaddai. He says to the world, die, enough. That's the Hagbola, the confinement, the limitation, that there should be something Mitzias Dover, an identity, a discernible identity. So in other words, number one is that it creates a container, and number two, that also the energy should be enclosed and concealed, like the materialization that comes of the fruit that comes through the interface of the seed. So the seed is also a form of, the seed is a direct outgrowth of the air that recedes, and that's what happens. So then it comes, the guardian that becomes, so it's all, that's all Shaddai. So Shaddai is the power that's telling it have a distinct identity, Metzius, and also that the energy should come in a confined way, like through the seed. Okay, wow. Yes. Where is the ruah?
I don't get it exactly.
Which parts?
I'm saying.
Join the club. Yeah.
The way I understood what you were saying, what you're reading, that Kel Olam is like the fact that the Gashmis itself, not the thing itself, is Elikus.
Olam.
Just that I have the Olam itself, right? And Shaddai is almost. Shaddai is that, like the. Not that.
That is that. Why not? Kel Shaddai, that he revealed himself to Kel Shaddai to the Ovis, means that the Ovis were Mamshech Kel in Shaddai. So, God created a world, and to create this world, He had to use Shaddai to limit the flow. But there's divine energy in that limitation as well. And the Ovis revealed Kel Shaddai. That's like revealing Kel and Elam. Dai means limit. That's all it means. It actually fits very well. Kel Shaddai is Kel Elam. Shaddai creates Elam. He's just explaining two aspects to it. One, there's a Metzias Davar, and also the air. The air that creates also should be confined and come down like through the interface of the intermediary of the seed. That just seems to be a very important point. The seed is the Keli. Okay, it's fine.
So what basically?
Yeah, very good. That's very good. The energy is planted in order to bear fruit, which is this existence. That is Kel Shaddai. That's what Kel Shaddai does, and Kel Elam is the revelation of that in Elam.
The whole transformation from Tehu to Tikkun is just a matter of Gilui. What was Nigala, that this Syra is not a dead kind of a shell, but it's a godly Chayas.
Yeah.
So,
and before that, it was concealed.
The words we're using, Hamshoch. Hamshoch means something that was not here, and we brought it to be here. Is it just to be legal in a way, or it's more than that?
If you were Megala godliness in this world, would that be a chiddush or would it be a small little thing?
I think it would be a chiddush.
Right, exactly. So Hamshoch and Gilui is the same thing for all practical purposes.
That's basically.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Doesn't matter whether it's here and you're revealing it.
Avram started the process of revealing to us that.
But such a revelation requires Hamshach. It doesn't just happen.
Okay.
So you have to do something about it. So that's Hamshach. So whether you call Hamshach or Gilui, doesn't matter. If there's a deep darkness, and Golos, and someone suddenly reveals godliness, who cares whether you call it Gilui or Hamshach? It's the same thing. He says he uses interchangeable.
He's faster.
Hamshach and Gilui.
Well, Gilui seems to
No, Matan Teda would be a chiddush. See, Matan Teda is going to bring a new energy that is not even there in the first place. Yeah.
Really?
Avram is aligning it, but he's aligning it with the God that created it. But it's a pretty big chiddush too, because the world was not there. The world was not aligned. Okay.
People lived in a way that he's not here.
Well, let's put it this way: people live like they live today. We could use an Avram. The only difference is that Avram existed, and there were people who already did a lot of work. But if you look right now in the street, it's more or less very similar to what Avram saw. Except the only thing is we did a lot of refinement internally, so it's much easier today. He pioneered the way. But how does there's 7 billion people on this earth? What are most people doing right now? Tell me.
Kill Jews.
You ever think? There you go.
The divine energy. Kill the divine energy.
They don't think about divine energy.
Yeah.
Except a few of us sitting at this table, the world is very consumed with itself. As I said, even while we're sitting here, we got our own. The Be'em Ezeu Tachlis HaTeva Chesed Lefi Shayzei Dafki Yechel Mekabel Ha'Se'er Shebechinas HaGuli. And true, this is the ultimate good and kindness. He said this before, that the ultimate kindness is when it's Shaddai. Because if it flowed forever, it would destroy everything. Yeah, because through this, so this is also, it's just an additional element that it's a positive, it's a good, the ultimate goodness and kindness. Now he goes with another interpretation, the word Shaddai, die. This is a big makubal. This is a makubal. Yes, Giktilaya. Yeah, Giktilaya. He was Italian great makubal. Yes, Middle Ages. Beis Isa. He writes like this. It's brought in Chassidus. Shari Eira. It's brought in Chassidus.
This is Middle Rebbe.
No, Shari Eira from Yeshiv the Giktilaya. There was. Yeah.
You thought we have just the Kabbalah?
The Masha Amr Azal B'Gemara Sha'amr Le'elamei Dai. This is what he writes. That what it says in the Gemara that he said to the world Le'elamei, to his world, stop. In other words, it's the flow, stopping the flow. Imei Yesh Shalafia Poshet Hapiris B'Dat. Even though that according to the literal or the simple interpretation in this, Hu Ki B'Midas Kel Shadei Hu Neisen Mazon L'Chol Beria Beria. Simple interpretation is because with the midah of Kel Shaddai, with the feature, with the virtue of. Is it? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That even though, that the simple interpretation, like he said before, that the world would have just have expanded. What he said before was not that the world itself, but the divine energy would have expanded had he not. Until he said to it enough, stop. So you needed the break, you needed the confinement. That's Pirush HaPoshet. Even though that's a simple interpretation, which we learned till now, there's a deeper interpretation. The primary, deeper, inner meaning in this is, that with the midah, with the virtue, with the feature, with the midah, with the attribute of Kel Shaddai, God gives mazon, sustenance, l'chol beria to every creature and creature, u'mashalech b'chesav l'odam, and he sends blessings to the human being. I think it's l'odam, l'odam, ad sheyivlu sifsasei melei medai, until their lips will rub out. Yivlu will become exhausted. Yivlu is actually Lashon. They'll become so. In other words, so worn out. But even more, you know what happens? Lips are not chapped. Yivlu, it's like more than worn out. You know when you're like exhausted. Yivlu, withered. Right? It's a pasuk. Akesim lachem bracha ad li dai. It's singing by the Rebbe. Akesim lachem bracha ad li dai. That you're crazy. You should pour. The Rebbe gave mashke. Then the Fabringans they would sing. He would start this nigun. I'll pour you blessings. Adli die till no end, until your lips become completely withered from saying. For saying enough. In other words. It's an interesting expression. So is it bli gvul or is it gvul? Well, you're going to learn about Avram. About Avram. So Hineni. Listen. This is the beginning of now chapters. He's going to explain this in chapters from now. You want to. Basically, he's going a deeper explanation that the Ovis didn't just bring down the dai. In other words, the confined. They brought to a point of bli dai, in dai. That Misper has in it even Bli Misper. And Bli Misper, yeah.
No.
But the thing that Rabbi Shab is going to disappoint you? Huh?
I just was wondering if I'm getting it.
He just began the interpretation. We didn't even go anywhere. So now he says, "Subsim lemedad v'chol habrachas v'atevis hanishpois ba'odam." I'm thinking ba'adnai. One second, ba'adnai? No, it's not adnai.
Bottom seems like better.
No, it is over ba'adama maybe. I don't think so. I have to look it up. Mishal is brachas la'adama. Chir is brachas Adam.
Adam is not included in Beria?
That's what I'm wondering. I'm not sure, but Adama doesn't fit here. And what else is there? Adnai it's for sure not. Okay, that's one. Chol habrachos am tevis and ishpois ba'adam.
L'malas tzedach called Beria.
Ba'adama maybe. And earth, unless he means earth in general. I don't know. Either one. So every creature, all the blessings and all the good that is transmitted below, to fulfill the malas tzedach kol beria, to fulfill the need of every creature. Ayidei kel shadei hu ka'amrei v'kel shadei yivorach eschem. That's like he says, v'kel shadei yivorach, but kel shadei with the name kel shadei yivorach, you'll bless eschem. Yivorach will bless you. Behind the kel shadei hu riboy hashpa. So we see here now kel shadei is an increased, a intense and a plentiful transmission. Al derech mashakasav kesi lachem bracha b'lidai. Like it says, "Var kesi lachem bracha b'lidai." I will pour for you blessings without end. Shalom razal alzei ad sheyivlu subsesechem malei medai. As I'll say that it's so much that your subsesechem, your lips will stop, will begin to wither from saying die. Enough. Is that interesting? Okay. What you have here is really a contradiction of terms, basically. It's enough or not enough. You understand? You keep getting, but you're saying die, right? Now the Rebbe Rashab says, seemingly it appears from this, that this is without limit. Shari oz, shari zehu, masha yivlu. That's what means sheyivlu. Because the fact that your lips are withering means that it keeps on pouring. You can't take it. However, in truth, it's not that way. See, the Rebbe Rashab is anticipating all our wise ideas, right? That's why I say, have patience, trust the Rebbe. He's going to cover his bases. Look at this. Someone wrote this and another few volumes like this. You could rest assured he's pretty thorough. That's the only thing. That's the only confidence I have. I know. Keep reading. He's going to cover everything. Whether we'll understand it all is another story. But because it's not. If you're really thinking about it, initially it seems like it's like a nice expression. You keep on giving until your lips wither. You can't say die. But that's not what it says. It's saying in truth, when you think about it, it's with the mugbal. It's a finite entity. It's a finite entity that's with his lips are withering. What's the word yivla? The word from bola, like. So but when clothes. What happens when they right? What's the expression? Not just they wear out.
Like he was wearing this.
Rags.
Yeah,
but there's a word not worn out. Yeah, worn out. That's a good word. It's worn down. They're worn down. Yivlu is like they're worn down.
What's meant withered?
Withered, like a flower that withers. A wither means like it dies. It starts weakening. Yeah, you can use withered.
Modern Hebrew they use it. Yeah.
In this case, it's from use, basically.
How do you know Hebrew so well? How long did you spend in Israel?
15 years.
15 years?
I finished high school. I was in the army there. What are you talking about?
Wow. So that's.
You learn
Okay, I thought you went there like for a holding pattern for like a year or something.
We came there.
Okay, very nice.
Real good.
Okay, so here we go. What does this
mean?
It means that the hashpah is definitely, we're talking here, there's a very abundant transmission and an intense one. But as the Mugbal is saying, in other words, don't say it's not a matter of bilti akbala here. But you can't call it bli gvul.
it's lots of.
Without end, the imkein lo yahya hanivra mugbal masigay klal, because then the creature would never comprehend it altogether. In other words, he couldn't even say that his lips are withering or whatever we called it, wearing down. So you have to say that it's still in the confines of someone that's saying, die. Now he's bringing another proof. So initially he said that seemingly you could say Harinira Biltag Bala. But in truth it's not that way. Now he's bringing another proof. Also from what we call bracha, Varkesi Lacham bracha. It's a blessing. Remember we said it's a blessing that each creature gets what it needs. Yeah, moving gamkin shazar bagbala. We also understand from this that it's a labdam. Shahari inyan abracha yudu shazar mashakvar yeshna b'mekede. Because a blessing it's known as opposed to davening, as he's saying in a minute. A bracha means when you get a blessing from someone, they're revealing something that is in your source, but you haven't revealed it yet. It hasn't been drawn into you. That's where Yaakov, I don't know if he's going to bring this, but that's where Yaakov. Right, exactly. V'zehu kidua hefresh ben bracha v'tefillah. Like it's known the difference between bracha and tefillah, a blessing and a prayer. That's why when Yaakov said, when he exchanged his hands and put his right hand on Ephraim and Menashe, why couldn't he just give Menashe the blessing? Because he was giving a bracha, and a bracha you can't change someone's destiny. You could just reveal it. And he knew that Menashe was getting this blessing and Ephraim this, but he was drawing it down. Birchas Kainim, for example, they say is a combination of both blessing and prayer. But prayer has a hirotzen. A prayer you could pray, and someone's, let's say, God forbid, sick, and you pray for shlema, even though their destiny you can actually change God's will and create a new revelation. But prayer is more difficult. Bracha is easier, obviously.
Do you want to ask your hands both too? Because it
says in Birchas Kainim, I don't know about Shemoneh Esrei, I've never heard that.
The Kainim say hirotzen before they bench.
Yeah, true. Okay. And something that's already there in the root and the source must be confined and measured and parameters in a way that you could receive it. So that's what the meaning of bracha is. It is by definition a defined form of blessing that fits to the person that deserves it, that is destined to have it. The question is on Birchas Yitzchak. When Yitzchak blessed Yaakov, how could he give Yaakov a blessing that belonged to Esav? That's the question. It was only a blessing, it was not a prayer. So you could answer there because he thought it was Esav.
Yeah, Yitzchak was the one that was Esav.
Yeah, but still, did it get to him? Or was it just a waste? Because it was the whole point.
That's right.
And what did Yaakov and Rivka think?
No,
you can't fool. A blessing is either you get it or you don't get it. But that's
what's the
to be discussed.
But the blessing is to who it goes, or the blessing has in itself. It's bringing down Amshach from somewhere.
No, but that's fitting to that person. That's why Menashe and Ephraim. You can't give it to someone else.
Yeah, but who's to say that if Esav got that bracha, it wouldn't have been different words? It wouldn't have been different.
What do you mean? It's a bracha that belongs to. It's like when Yaakov gave Menashe and Ephraim, he couldn't change it. But this belongs to him. This belongs to him. It's basically knowing your destiny, except the door is closed. So the bracha opens the door, but it can't create a new door, a new destiny, a new channel. Anyway,
unless they had a common thing, and
yeah, there's a
joint bank account, and we got it out first, baby.
Okay. And what is transmitted and drawn down from this is in a diminished state, and in mamish hakbala, it's mamish limited. Because also the source is limited. So the transmission is also a diminished state. Because energy that is fundamentally infinite, without end, is not subject to diminishment. And the bracha came down, transmitted as it is in its source, and that's the abundant transmission. Like we speak, Yitzchak planted Vayizra, again Zera. He planted the seeds V'yimtza, and what emerged, what sprouted, was 100 times as much. Me'er Shadim, 100, literally gates, but Me'er Shadim means 100 produce measures. V'yivarchehu Havaya, and God blessed him. Sha'abrachu sha'ayat tzmicha b'riboy. The blessing was that the tzmicha, that the growth should be abundant. Nevertheless, it's still Akbala. It's Me'er Sharim. You say Me'er, you don't say more. So we see blessing brings down from the source. What's Lashon Hari Kesi? Hari Kesi. So you usually say to pour. It says Shemedikin Mikeli El Keli. It's like emptying, pouring from one container to another. In other words, you're not creating something new. You're Yumshach. Which is already there in the source. Yumshach Lamata should be drawn down above. Imkain, how does it Akbala? He's all bringing the case here that dai, shadai, and dai is still Akbala. V'hainu shalosh and bli dai l'cheir meir al bli gvul. V'agam shalosh and bli dai l'cheir meir al bli gvul. And even though it says what case lechem bracha ad bli dai. So l'cheir, the word itself means seemingly indicates on infinite and bli gvul. Hinei razal shedorshu mashakosu bli dai sheyivlu hetziu zem l'shon bli gvul. It's an interesting expression. Razal, that interpreted this possibly die, actually they took it out of the word Melashon Bligvul. So in other words, from the pasuk itself, without the Ma'am Chazal, you can interpret Ad Blidai, Bligvul, but Chazal limited it. Said no. By saying Ad Sheyivlu, Ad. Understand, but the Chazal did was limit. The question is, how do they know? Maybe the pasuk is talking ad blidai, but clearly they are limiting it, because the pasuk itself would be ad blidai, and they say no ad till sheyivlu subsechem melemer dai, which is already some limitation. But it's still not a contradiction to the pasuk. Why? Because it's not agbala k'moy dai stam. It's not just enough. Shepirish ad pa tov v'leyesh. It's not just come till here and not more. U'blidai hainu yeshim medai. So the taich of blidai means more than just the minimum, more than just yeshim, more than just enough. B'loshin azefil vifl genug. B'loshin Yiddish. Azefil vifl genug. Azefil vifl genug means, which one's loshin Yiddish? Yeshim medai or dai? Azefil vifl genug. Which one would you say? Azefil vifl genug. Probably blidai, yeah. So much. Azefil vifl genug. U'kumei dai v'hoiser. Like we say, enough and a little extra. Sheba malachas hamishkan. By the malachas hamishkan, he says dai v'hoiser. That he made enough and some more in the building of the mishkan. That he built the mishkan and a little more. Omnam be'erech v'sug zeh yechshav. However, it's still in this category. So it's still in the category of dai. Except it's bleed dai. It's an in-between place, because bleed gvul, it's not bleed gvul mamash, basically.
It's very boy.
Right. What?
Okay, let's finish the mime already. According to this, we'll understand what it says in the beginning of the Ten Commandments. It's known there's Mitzrayim in holiness, sacred Mitzrayim, holy Mitzrayim. What is that? Hagabala. Mitzarim v'gvulim. So Mitzrayim also is a day of confinement, of limit. That's referring to the confinement and the limitation of the energy that comes midu mishkal, that comes measured and weighed a certain amount, and manifests in the containers of that confine the energy. And Matan Teira was the whole idea of Matan Teira was to leave these confinements and these boundaries. Finally, that should be a revelation of energy that's not confined. This is the meaning of Anechi Hashem. So that's a pshat. So why did the Matan Teira begin with Anechi Hashem Alekecha? Because that's what Matan Teira is, to take you out of Mitzarim V'Gvulim, or even of Kedusha. what the Avos had, to bring it to Bligvul. And this is what it says, Anechi Hashem Elokecha. This is also the meaning of the word, 3 words, Anechi Hashem Elokecha. The Havaya b'chinas ha'er. Havaya is energy, light. And in the air itself, there's 2 levels, as we discussed. An energy that is a relationship with the world, and there's another energy that is be'erech ha'atzmus, that is more commensurate and more expression of atzmus. And also there, the energy is also not in Hagabala. So they have two levels. And this is Anechi Hashem, that the revelation of Matan Torah was the revelation of Shem Havaya, Kamei Teres Hashem and Mitzvahs Hashem. God Teres Hashem Havaya and Mitzvahs Havaya. Hu b'chinas Shem Havaya Kamei Shehu Mitzad Anechi. That's the Shem Havaya as it is from Anechi. Anechi Hashem. Anechi is Atzmus. Mitzad Anechi, Mitzad Atzmus Eid Ein Sof, rather. Anechi is Atzmus Eid Ein Sof. And Anechi Hashem means not Hashem of Kel Shadeh, Hashem of Anechi, the Eid that is without any limitations. And then he says, Anechi Hashem Elokecha, that took you out of Egypt. The call in Torah, because the whole in of Torah is that you should go out of limitations, to leave and transcend from all the boundaries and limitations, even of holiness. He doesn't mention here that God created heaven and earth. The creation of heaven and earth is the creation of a confined world. Because that Bereshis Bara Elokim, where he said to the world, die, Shaddai. Here is a revelation of going out of. Liyas B'chinas Gvul, that it should be confined. Rather here, he notifies us and informs us, here he tells us about Yetzias Mitzrayim, because that's the whole purpose of Matan Torah, to take us out of Mitzrayim V'Gvul. This is the meaning of Anechi Hashem. There should be the revelation of Shem Havaya Kameshu Mitzad B'chinas Anechi Havaya that comes from Tzad Anechi. Now, it's the higher level of energy that is divine, that's unlimited. And through this, we'll take you out of Eretz Mitzrayim from Mitzrayim Gvul. Like you said before, the Eretz Gvul, what's its purpose? Bittul, elements, to take you out of the world. The first energy creation can only bring you an energy that's within existence. It can't transform the world and bring it to a level that's beyond. That you need Anechi Havaya. The question is, why does it say Elokecha? That it even comes down, even in the level of Elokecha, I guess. That the Bligvul comes even into Elokecha.
Why did he use the Egyptian word Anochi?
Kitzur, the summary, this is Kelelam, what Avram does. Kamei Aprishi, he Aras Keichet Tzemech, Nizgashim, Ein Shum Shinui. Like the fruit that is just a reflection of the generative power in the earth that became a gushim, that became materialized. And there's no shinui, it doesn't cause any shinui, any change in the source, in the Keichet Tzemech. Kelelam. The same thing as the world is just the reflection of the divine that came in, that became materialized. It doesn't cause any change at all. Rama Kal Goyim is above all the Goyim, because they say that's the level of Ilah V'al, cause and effect. That the effect causes a change in the cause. And the effect is not of the Muhus, it's not of the same person, it's a different entity. Like Seichel Midas, which is cause and effect, intellect and emotions, and same thing with a teacher and a student, a transmitter and a recipient. But in truth, they're wrong. It's not like that. It's not Ilah V'al, but like we said before, that God is beyond heaven and earth, and therefore He could be here just as much as there, and doesn't cause any effect. And that's Kele Elam. And this is what it means, Avram, till Avram there was no beard, no zikna age. And the Maggid teaches that means that he drew down the 13 channels of the beard. Like for example, they hear that like we said before about the fruit, they themselves are the life force in the mind, but they became material. They took on a shape, a layer of matter. Same thing, the world is divine, and its root is from the first tikkun, the first channel of the 13 attributes. And this is what it means Avram began to radiate, illuminate. He transmitted the implanted energy that it should become a mitzvah, it should become an actual substance. And he revealed that the world is godly, like the Kelim Lamaila. He revealed it in the containers above, that they're just really the divine, and also in the world below. Then he concludes, in Shari Eira it says that Shem Shadi is Ad Bli Dai. It's also a transmission that's in a defined and confined way. But in the confinement, it's a ribui, it's an increased transmission to the point that Bli Dai.
What's the Dai? Dai is not just Takbola.
He's going to explain this in the next 25 pages. At length. He's going to explain this whole thing at length. It means that the Ovis don't just remember we spoke about Sfiris is Mispar, Sipur, and Sapir. So Mispar, it begins with Mispar, but then the Mispar he brings Bli Mispar. So he wants to show that even in Gvul you can expand it to a point. Yeah, and then you jump into Bli Gvul, which is Matan Teira. So the Ovis didn't just this first stage was come that far. Okay. and so we finished Discourse 33, and we did finish the chapter 133, pages 258 and 259.